The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus said to the crowds, "This is how it is with the kingdom of God. It is as if a man were to scatter seed on the land and would sleep and rise night and day, and through it all the seed would sprout and grow. He knows not how. Of its own accord, the land yields fruit. First the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. And when the grain is ripe, he wields the sickle at once, for the harvest has come." He said, "To what shall we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable can we use for it? It is like a mustard seed, that when it is sown in the ground, it is the smallest of all the seeds on the earth. But once it is sown, it springs up and becomes the largest of plants, and puts forth large branches so that the birds of the sky can dwell in its shade." With many such parables, he spoke the word to them as they were able to understand it. Without parables, he did not speak to them, but to his own disciples, he explained everything in private. The Gospel of the Lord. For nearly every priest, the first Mass is typically a big deal. Almost exactly 2 years ago, on June 17th, 2022, I was getting prepared to celebrate my first Mass right here at Blessed Sacrament, with a big reception in the patio area behind us. So the patio garden was set up with tables and chairs and other festive decorations, thanks to Gil and Nora and some family members. The caterers, they had already begun the preparations for the banquet of rich food and fine wine. My sister, she was putting the finishing touches on all the homemade desserts. And all the guests, I'm sure they were ready and they're excited for the upcoming festivities. And I was looking at the results of the COVID test that I had just taken, and it was positive. So, of course, the party and the festivities had to be canceled. So down came the decorations, the caterers were called, and we had to cancel the food. And all the invited guests, of course, also were told of the news. So my first Mass, it had to be put on hold for a later date. About a week later, after I had tested negative for COVID, a Jesuit friend of mine was visiting me from Italy, and while wanting to show him a little bit of California, I took him up to San Francisco. We arrived sometime Thursday afternoon, and him being Italian, I wanted to take him out to an Italian restaurant to see if he would like it or not, out in North Beach. He gave his approval, it was very good. And afterwards, came back to the Jesuit residence, and perhaps because I was a little bit tired from the journey and a little bit maybe recovering still from COVID, I went to sleep. The next day, I woke up early, and because I hadn't been to Mass in about 2 weeks since my ordination Mass, I went down the hill to St. Ignatius Parish to go to the 8 a.m. Mass. And I remember walking into that church, and as I walked in, I was flooded with memories of my time there as a parishioner. It's a very special place for me because that's where I met the Jesuits, and it's also where I found my vocation. So it's a very special place. As I was looking around for a seat, I saw an old friend, so I went up to him to go say hello. And perhaps because I hadn't seen him in years and I was wearing a mask, and perhaps because he was a little bit frantic, he didn't recognize me. So he kind of brushed me off. But a second later, he turned around and called my name and said hello, apologized for the brush off, and then he congratulated me because I had just been ordained. And then rather briskly, to my surprise, he looked at me intently and said, "The priest didn't show up. can you say Mass? And I was hit with a ton of bricks. I had no idea that I would be there to celebrate Mass. And my first thought was, no, how could I do that? First of all, I couldn't get in front of, up here in front of all these people. There weren't that many people. Also, I had been in Spain for the last 3 years, so I hadn't been to an English Mass in years, except for that ordination Mass that I'd been to. Also, even though I'd been studying theology for 3 years, they never actually taught us how to say Mass. Also, I didn't have a homily prepared, and I always imagined that my first Mass would be kind of like a celebration or a big event. And that was none of it. So it was the last thing that I wanted to do. I just wanted to go to Mass that day. But as I looked at the congregation, it may sound a little cheesy, as I looked at the congregation, they were like sheep without a shepherd. And something within me said, you should just do it. So reluctantly, I said yes. And I celebrated my first Mass there without the invited guests, without the big celebration afterwards, without all the hoopla. I celebrated my first Mass at St. Ignatius. I entered the Jesuit novitiate 12 years ago, and that's the first stage of formation where you learn about the Jesuits and you discern, is this life for me? After 2 years there, I took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And then I was sent to the next stage of formation, philosophy studies, first studies. And that was in St. Louis University. I was there for 2 years. And then I was sent to Guadalajara, Mexico to study Spanish for 1 year. And then from there, I was sent up north to Bellarmine College Prep to teach high school, juniors and freshmen religion and coach basketball. And then from there, I was sent to Madrid for 3 years to study theology. And then I was ordained. 10 years of training and formation. A long time. And you would think with all that training and formation, I would have been ready to celebrate that first Mass when I was called upon to do it. But I tell you, it was a complete disaster. It was a disaster. This book that I flipped through, I got lost going through it. I didn't know what page I should be on. When I was up here behind the altar, we do these things with our hands, and I didn't know what to do with my hands at all either. My knees were shaking, and when I give the homily, my throat went dry and my mind went blank, so I stuttered through something incomprehensible. I was so nervous. In today's gospel reading, Jesus talks about the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God. He talks about how a man plants seed in the land, and then night and day he would sleep and rise, and the seed would sprout and grow, and he did not know how. He did not know how. I just mentioned that the first Mass is typically a pretty big deal. And it's a big deal because it's the culmination, right, of all this formation and training, and then finally get to celebrate the priesthood, that one is finally a priest. Well, for me, it was a big deal because it made me realize that after all these years of training and formation, it made me realize that I wasn't a priest. It made me realize I didn't feel like a priest. I didn't believe I was a priest at all. So after that first Mass, I began to think to myself and wonder, when will I ever sprout and grow into becoming a priest? When will I ever sprout and grow into believing, into actually being a priest and doing priestly things? I did not know how. But after 2 years here at Blessed Sacrament, now I know. Because like that man in the parable who would sleep and rise night and day, I too would sleep and rise night and day, and I would come here. I would come here and I would prepare homilies. I would meet with parishioners and people off the street. I would hear confessions. I would celebrate masses. I would baptize. I would marry people and bury people. And I would walk with people. And I would walk with you. I sprouted and grew into becoming a priest because of you. Because of you. Because you trusted me, because you cared for me, because you believed in me, because you inspired me, because you challenged me, because you shaped me, because you formed me, because you prayed for me, and because you loved me. And that, my friends, is powerful. You changed me. You transformed me through your prayer and through your love, and that is power. You can take that same prayer and that same love and bring it out into that world, and you, my friends, will change it. You will transform it. You will transform it into the kingdom of God. He does not know how. We know how. It is through prayer, and it is through love. By bringing that prayer and by bringing that love into that world, you transform it into the kingdom of God. Because you changed me and you transformed me. You made me sprout. You made me grow. You made me believe. You made me a priest. And I'm forever grateful for that. I am forever grateful for that. I will always carry each of you in my prayers. I ask that you do the same. So thank you. Thank you. And I love you.